Welcome to Murder Midnight, a crime storytelling channel for sleeping, where crime meets calm and mystery meets the mind at rest. Tonight we travel through time and history. But before we close our eyes and start, please comment what country you are tuning in from. It will greatly help us here at Murder Midnight. Okay, let's start with the first story. The Emperor's Secret, Paris, French Empire, October 1807. Inspector Jean-Baptiste Vidocq adjusted his dark blue uniform as he walked through the fog-shrouded streets of Paris toward the Palais Royal, his breath visible in the crisp autumn air. At 32, the former criminal-turned-police investigator had already earned a reputation as one of the most effective crime solvers in Napoleon's empire, using his intimate knowledge of the Parisian underworld to unravel mysteries that baffled his more conventional colleagues. The summons had come from Joseph Fouché himself, the Minister of Police whose network of spies and informants made him one of the most feared men in France. When Fouché called, even Napoleon listened, and when he requested Vidocq's services personally, it meant the case involved matters of the highest sensitivity to the empire. Paris in 1807 was a city transformed by revolution and conquest. The narrow medieval streets were being replaced by grand boulevards, while the palaces of the old aristocracy housed the new nobility created by Napoleon's victories across Europe. The city buzzed with the energy of an empire at its zenith, but beneath the surface lay currents of intrigue, espionage, and conspiracy that threatened the stability of the regime. Vidocq had witnessed this transformation firsthand. Born into poverty, he had spent his youth as a deserter, smuggler, and forger before his arrest led to an unexpected opportunity. His offer to serve the police as an informant had evolved into a position as an official investigator, making him one of the first detectives in modern police history. His unconventional methods and criminal contacts made him invaluable in solving cases that required understanding of both high society and the criminal underworld. The Palais Royal, once the residence of royalty, now served as the headquarters of the Ministry of Police. Its elegant courtyards and grand chambers had been converted into offices where Fouché's agents coordinated surveillance operations across Europe. The building's atmosphere of barely contained paranoia reflected the minister's belief that enemies of the state lurked everywhere, requiring constant vigilance to preserve the empire. Fouché received Vidocq in his private office, a chamber decorated with maps of Europe showing the extent of French conquests and furnished with the luxury that reflected his position as one of Napoleon's most trusted advisors. The minister was a thin man in his late 40s, with cold eyes and the calculating manner of someone who had survived both the terror and the subsequent political upheavals through careful manipulation of information and alliances. Vidocq, we face a crisis that threatens not only the security of the empire, but potentially the life of the emperor himself. What kind of crisis, Minister? This morning, the body of Colonel Antoine Rial was discovered in his apartment near the Tuileries. Colonel Rial was one of our most experienced counterintelligence officers, responsible for monitoring foreign agents operating in Paris. Vidocq knew Rial by reputation, a dedicated officer who had served with distinction in the campaigns against Austria and Prussia before being assigned to domestic security duties. You suspect murder rather than natural death? The circumstances are highly suspicious. Rial was found in his study with what appeared to be a suicide note, claiming he could no longer bear the guilt of betraying the empire. But the handwriting analysis suggests the note was forged. This was significant. In an age when handwriting was a crucial form of identification, expert analysis of documents was one of the most reliable investigative tools available. What kind of betrayal was mentioned in the note? The note claimed that Rial had been providing information to British agents about French military operations. If true, it would explain several recent intelligence failures that have cost us dearly. Britain remained France's most determined enemy, maintaining a network of spies and saboteurs throughout the continent to undermine Napoleon's empire. The revelation that a high-ranking French officer might have been working for British intelligence would be catastrophic for military morale and public confidence. But you don't believe Rial was actually a traitor? Colonel Rial was one of our most loyal and effective officers. I find it impossible to believe he would betray the emperor. More likely, he was murdered by the Rial traitors to prevent him from exposing their activities. What was Rial investigating before his death? Fouché handed Vidocq a leather portfolio. These are Rial's most recent reports. He had identified several suspicious individuals who appeared to have access to sensitive military information. Vidocq examined the documents. Riel had been conducting surveillance on a diverse group of suspects. Count Philippe de Ségur, an aristocrat who had returned from exile after making his peace with the new regime. Madame Juliette Recamier, a celebrated salon hostess whose gatherings attracted prominent political figures. Baron Antoine Jean Gros, the court painter who had access to imperial residences. And Dr. Jean-Nicolas Corvisart, Napoleon's personal physician. These are all prominent members of society, Minister. Investigating them would require considerable discretion. Indeed, that's why I need someone with your particular skills and background. You can move through different levels of society without attracting the attention that would follow a conventional investigation. What evidence did Riel compile against these suspects? That's part of the mystery. His investigative files appear to have been removed from his apartment after his death. Whoever killed him also eliminated the evidence he had gathered. This suggested a sophisticated operation rather than a simple murder. The killer had not only eliminated Riel, but had also destroyed his work, indicating advanced knowledge of his investigation and careful planning. Minister, I'll need to examine Riel's apartment and interview his associates, but I should warn you that investigating prominent members of society could create political complications. The Emperor has given his personal authorization for this investigation. You have carte blanche to pursue the truth wherever it leads. Vidocq left the Palais Royal with a clear understanding of the stakes involved. The murder of a counterintelligence officer could indicate a broader conspiracy against the Empire, and failure to solve the case quickly could have serious consequences for France's military operations. Colonel Riel's apartment was located in a fashionable district near the Tuileries Palace, reflecting his status as a successful military officer in Napoleon's service. The building was elegant, but not ostentatious, typical of the residences favored by the Empire's professional military class. The apartment showed no signs of forced entry or struggle. Riel's body had been found at his writing desk, with the forged suicide note positioned prominently beside his hand. But Vidocq's trained eye noticed several inconsistencies that suggested the scene had been carefully arranged. The colonel's personal papers had been scattered, as if someone had searched through them hastily. More significantly, there were traces of a struggle in the study that had been partially concealed, overturned books that had been restacked, furniture that had been moved slightly from its original positions. Dr. Pierre Pelletan, who had examined the body for the police, provided Vidocq with his medical findings. Colonel Riel died from asphyxiation, but not from hanging, as the suicide note suggested. The markings on his neck indicate that he was strangled manually before being positioned at his desk. How long had he been dead when the body was discovered? Based on the body's condition, I estimate death occurred sometime between midnight and dawn. He was discovered by his servant around 8 in the morning. Any other injuries or signs of struggle? Defensive wounds on his hands and arms suggesting he fought his attacker. Riel was a military man and would not have submitted easily to violence. This confirmed Vidocq's suspicion that the colonel had been murdered by someone who then attempted to make it appear like suicide. The killer had been strong enough to overpower a trained soldier and sophisticated enough to stage an elaborate deception. Vidocq interviewed the building's other residents and staff, but none had heard sounds of struggle during the night. This suggested either that the murder had been accomplished quietly or that the killer had some method of preventing Riel from calling for help. His investigation of Riel's background revealed an exemplary military career, with no obvious vulnerabilities or compromising associations. The colonel had been decorated for bravery in multiple campaigns and had earned the respect of his colleagues and superiors. If he had enemies, they were not obvious from his personal or professional relationships. Vidocq decided to begin his investigation of the suspects by attending one of Madame Recamier's famous salons. These gatherings were legendary throughout Paris for bringing together the most brilliant minds and influential figures of the era, from writers and artists to politicians and military officers. Madame Recamier's salon was held in her elegant mansion on the Rue du Mont Blanc, a setting that combined luxury with intellectual sophistication. The hostess herself was a woman of perhaps 30, renowned throughout Europe for her beauty, intelligence, and ability to create an atmosphere where ideas flowed as freely as the finest wines. The evening's gathering included many of the suspects from Riel's investigation. Count de Ségur was holding court near the fireplace, regaling a group of listeners with stories of his experiences in the Russian court before the revolution. Baron Gros was sketching portraits of the guests, his artist's eye capturing not only their physical features, but their psychological characteristics. Dr. Corvisar was engaged in animated discussion about medical advances with several fellow physicians. Vidocq, posing as a recently successful businessman seeking to establish himself in Parisian society, was able to observe the interactions between the various suspects without attracting undue attention. His years in the criminal underworld had taught him to blend into different social environments and to read the subtle signs of deception and guilt. During the evening, he overheard several conversations that provided insights into the suspects' backgrounds and motivations. Count de Ségur spoke nostalgically about the old regime while professing loyalty to Napoleon, but his comments suggested an ambivalence about the empire that could be exploited by foreign agents. Baron Gros discussed his work on imperial commissions, including recent paintings for the Tuileries Palace that would have given him access to sensitive areas of the imperial residence. His casual mention of interesting conversations overheard while working suggested he might have acquired information that could be valuable to enemy agents. Dr. Corvisar's medical discussions revealed his intimate knowledge of Napoleon's health and daily routines, information that could be extremely valuable to anyone planning an attack on the emperor. But it was Madame Recamier herself who proved most intriguing. Despite her reputation as a loyal supporter of the empire, Vidocq noticed that she seemed unusually interested in military topics and asked probing questions about recent campaigns and strategic planning. After the salon concluded, Vidocq arranged to encounter Dr. Corvisar privately outside the mansion. The physician was a distinguished man in his 50s, with the confident manner of someone who had earned imperial trust through demonstrated competence. Dr. Corvisar, I understand you knew Colonel Riel personally? Indeed, we occasionally dined together. Antoine was a dedicated officer who served the empire faithfully. Did he seem concerned about anything recently? Any enemies or threats? Riel was always discreet about his work, but he had mentioned concerns about security breaches that were affecting military operations. Did he suspect anyone specifically? Dr. Corvisar hesitated before answering. He was investigating patterns that suggested someone with high-level access was providing information to enemy agents, but he was careful not to make accusations without solid evidence. As the emperor's physician, you would have access to sensitive information about imperial schedules and security arrangements. Of course, but such information is strictly confidential. I would never discuss the emperor's private affairs with anyone. Despite his protestations of loyalty, Vidocq noticed that Corvisar seemed nervous about the direction of the questioning. The physician's access to Napoleon made him an attractive target for foreign intelligence services, seeking to infiltrate the imperial court. Vidocq's next investigation focused on Baron Gros, whose artistic work provided him with unusual access to government buildings and official ceremonies. He visited the Baron's studio in the Louvre, where many of France's most prominent artists maintain workshops. Gros was working on a large canvas depicting Napoleon's recent victory at Jena, a painting that would eventually hang in the Tuileries Palace. The studio was filled with sketches, color studies, and preliminary compositions that documented the artist's meticulous approach to historical painting. Baron Gros, your work must give you unique insights into the personalities and relationships of the imperial court. Art requires careful observation of character and motivation. I study my subjects closely to capture not only their physical appearance, but their psychological essence. Colonel Riel was investigating security concerns related to the imperial court. Did he ever consult with you about individuals who might have access to sensitive information? Riel did ask me about people I observed during my work at various government buildings. Artists often become invisible to those around them. People speak freely in the presence of someone they consider merely a craftsman. What kind of conversations did you overhear? Discussions of military strategies, diplomatic negotiations, personal relationships within the government, information that could be valuable to enemies of the empire if it fell into the wrong hands. Did you share this information with anyone besides Colonel Riel? Gros' expression became guarded. My loyalty is to the emperor and the empire. I would never knowingly assist enemies of France. But Vidocq noticed that the Baron had not directly answered the question, suggesting possible complications in his loyalties or activities. His investigation of Count de Segre proved equally complex. The Count had indeed returned from exile after the revolution, but his reintegration into French society had been carefully negotiated and monitored by Fouche's agents. Vidocq arranged to meet de Segre at the Café Procope, a literary gathering place that provided a neutral setting for their conversation. The Count was an elegant man in his 40s, with the refined manners of the old aristocracy and the careful speech patterns of someone accustomed to being watched by government agents. Count de Segre, your experiences in foreign courts must have given you valuable perspectives on European politics. Indeed, I spent many years observing the courts of Russia and Prussia. Those experiences helped me understand the challenges facing the empire in its current campaigns. Colonel Rial was investigating possible intelligence leaks that might have affected recent military operations. As someone with knowledge of foreign courts, you might have insights into how enemy agents operate. European courts are filled with spies and informants representing various interests. Intelligence gathering is considered a normal part of diplomatic activity. Did Rial ever consult with you about suspected enemy agents in Paris? He asked me to identify individuals whose backgrounds or behavior suggested possible foreign connections. My knowledge of European society made me useful in assessing such threats. Did you identify any specific suspects? De Segre paused before answering. There were several individuals whose activities seemed inconsistent with their stated purposes in Paris, but I preferred to share such observations only with appropriate authorities. Again, Vidocq noticed the careful phrasing that avoided specific commitments or admissions. The Count was clearly experienced in navigating dangerous political waters. As his investigation progressed, Vidocq began to see patterns that suggested a more complex conspiracy than simple espionage. Each of the suspects had legitimate reasons for possessing sensitive information, but each also had potential vulnerabilities that could be exploited by foreign agents. The breakthrough came when Vidocq discovered that all four suspects had recently received substantial sums of money from sources that could not be easily verified. Bank records showed deposits that appeared to originate from British commercial interests, suggesting payments for intelligence services. But rather than indicating four separate traders, the financial evidence suggested a coordinated operation involving multiple individuals with different types of access to sensitive information. Someone was orchestrating a comprehensive intelligence gathering effort that exploited the suspects' various positions within French society. Vidocq's investigation of the financial trail led him to an unexpected discovery. The payments were being coordinated through Madame Recamier's salon, which served as a sophisticated intelligence hub disguised as a social gathering. The salon provided the perfect cover for espionage activities. Prominent figures from government, military, and society attended regularly, creating opportunities for information gathering and coordination. The relaxed social atmosphere encouraged indiscreet conversation, while the hostess's reputation protected the gatherings from official scrutiny. But Vidocq realized that Recamier herself might not be the mastermind of the operation. Someone with even greater access and authority was needed to coordinate such an extensive intelligence network. His investigation of the salon's finances revealed that its operations were being supported by funds from the imperial treasury itself, payments that were being laundered through various government accounts to conceal their true source. This led Vidocq to a shocking conclusion. The intelligence operation was being run by someone within the highest levels of the French government, someone with access to imperial funds and the authority to recruit agents from within the empire's own elite. The final piece of the puzzle came when Vidocq discovered that Colonel Rial had been close to identifying this high-level traitor. His investigation had revealed the financial connections between the suspects and had traced the funding back to its source within the government. Rial's murder had been ordered not by British agents, but by the French official who was coordinating the intelligence operation. The colonel had been killed to prevent him from exposing a conspiracy that reached into the very heart of Napoleon's government. Vidocq's investigation led him to a disturbing conclusion. The traitor was someone who had been above suspicion, someone whose position and reputation provided perfect cover for treasonous activities. After careful analysis of the evidence, he realized that the mastermind of the conspiracy was Joseph Fouché himself, the minister of police who had assigned him to investigate the case. Fouché's position as head of the secret police gave him access to all sensitive government information and the authority to recruit agents throughout French society. His network of spies and informants provided the perfect infrastructure for gathering intelligence and transmitting it to foreign powers. The minister's apparent dedication to exposing the conspiracy was actually an elaborate deception designed to eliminate the evidence of his own treason and to redirect suspicion toward innocent individuals. Colonel Real had been murdered because he had discovered Fouche's role in the intelligence operation. The forged suicide note was intended to discredit Real's investigations and protect Fouche's network from further scrutiny. But confronting Fouche directly would be extremely dangerous. As Minister of Police, he controlled the very forces that Vidocq would need to arrest him. Moreover, Fouche's political connections and reputation for ruthlessness made him one of the most powerful men in France. Vidocq decided to gather additional evidence before making his accusations. He needed proof that would be so compelling that even Napoleon would be forced to act against his trusted minister. His investigation revealed that Fouche had been playing a complex double game for years, maintaining his position in Napoleon's government while secretly providing information to British intelligence. The minister's survival through multiple political upheavals had been aided by his ability to serve different masters while appearing loyal to each. The evidence included coded correspondence between Fouche and British agents, financial records showing payments from British sources, and documentation of intelligence that had been transmitted through the Salon network. Most damning of all, Vidocq discovered that Fouche had been planning to eliminate him as well. Once the investigation of Real's murder was complete, the minister could not afford to leave alive the one person who had uncovered the full scope of his treasonous activities. Vidocq realized he needed to act quickly before Fouche could arrange his accident or suicide. But he also needed to ensure that his evidence would reach Napoleon even if something happened to him. He arranged to meet with General Giraud Duroc, Napoleon's Grand Marshal of the palace, who had the authority to bring urgent matters directly to the emperor's attention. Duroc was one of the few officials who could be trusted absolutely, having demonstrated his loyalty through years of faithful service. The meeting took place in the Tuileries Palace, in Duroc's private office where they could speak without fear of surveillance by Fouche's agents. General Duroc, I have uncovered evidence of a conspiracy that threatens the very security of the empire. What kind of conspiracy, Inspector? Minister Fouche has been providing intelligence to British agents through a network of unwitting accomplices in Parisian society. Colonel Real was murdered because he discovered this operation. Duroc's expression grew grave as Vidocq presented his evidence. The general understood the implications immediately. If the Minister of Police was a traitor, then the entire security apparatus of the empire had been compromised. This is an extraordinary accusation, Vidocq. The evidence must be absolutely conclusive. I have financial records, correspondence, and testimony that establish Fouche's guilt beyond reasonable doubt. But we must act quickly. I believe he plans to eliminate me before I can present this evidence to the emperor. What do you propose? We need to arrest Fouche immediately and secure his files before he can destroy the evidence. But the operation must be conducted by personnel who are not under his direct authority. Duroc agreed to coordinate with the Imperial Guard to arrange Fouche's arrest. The operation would be conducted in secret to prevent the minister from escaping or destroying additional evidence. The arrest took place the following morning in Fouche's office at the Palais Royal. The minister was taken completely by surprise, having expected that his deception would remain undetected until he could eliminate Vidocq. When confronted with the evidence of his treason, Fouche initially attempted to deny the charges. But the documentation was overwhelming, and his carefully constructed web of lies began to unravel under scrutiny. You don't understand the complexities of governing an empire, Fouche finally admitted. Sometimes it's necessary to maintain relationships with potential enemies to prevent greater conflicts. By providing them with French military secrets? By ensuring that any conflict between France and Britain would be conducted on terms favorable to French interests. This was a sophisticated rationalization for treason, but it failed to disguise the fundamental betrayal of Napoleon's trust and the French people's security. The investigation of Fouche's activities revealed the full scope of his double dealing. For years, he had been providing British intelligence with information about French military operations, political developments, and economic policies. In return, he had received substantial payments and guarantees of protection if Napoleon's regime collapsed. The Salon network had been merely one component of a much larger intelligence operation that included agents throughout the French government and military. Fouche's position as Minister of Police had allowed him to identify and recruit individuals who could provide valuable information to enemy agents. Colonel Raoul's murder had been ordered when his investigation began to threaten the entire network. Fouche had hoped that staging Raoul's death as suicide would discredit his work and prevent further investigation of the intelligence leaks. The four suspects whom Raoul had been investigating, de Segur, Recamier, Gros, and Corvassar, were revealed to be largely innocent dupes who had been manipulated into providing information without realizing they were serving enemy agents. Madame Recamier's salon had indeed been used as an intelligence hub, but she had been unaware of its true purpose. The conversations and observations shared at her gatherings had been systematically collected and transmitted to British agents through Fouche's network. Napoleon's reaction to the discovery of Fouche's treason was swift and decisive. The former minister was tried by military tribunal and executed for high treason, becoming one of the most prominent casualties of the empire's internal security measures. The emperor also ordered a complete reorganization of the police and intelligence services to prevent similar penetration by foreign agents. New security procedures were implemented to monitor the activities of government officials and to detect potential traitors before they could do serious damage. Vidocq was promoted to head the new Criminal Investigation Department, becoming the first official detective in French police history. His success in uncovering Fouche's conspiracy demonstrated the value of systematic investigation techniques and established the foundation for modern police work. The case also highlighted the vulnerabilities of authoritarian governments to insider threats. Fouche's position of trust had allowed him to cause enormous damage before his activities were detected, demonstrating the need for internal checks and balances even within loyal government institutions. Colonel Raoul was posthumously honored for his dedication to uncovering the conspiracy, and his investigative methods became a model for future counterintelligence operations. His death had not been in vain. It had exposed a threat that could have undermined the entire empire. The salon culture of Napoleonic Paris continued to flourish, but with greater awareness of the potential security risks posed by gatherings where sensitive information might be shared. The intellectual freedom that made these gatherings valuable also made them vulnerable to exploitation by hostile intelligence services. Vidocq's investigation established his reputation as one of Europe's most skilled detectives, leading to his eventual founding of the first private detective agency and his influence on the development of modern police methods throughout the world. In his memoirs written years later, Vidocq reflected on the Fouche case as a turning point in his understanding of human nature and political power. The greatest criminals are often those who hide behind respectability and authority. They use their positions of trust to commit crimes that ordinary criminals could never achieve, making them far more dangerous to society than the thieves and murderers who operate in the shadows. The emperor's secret had been preserved, but at the cost of discovering that one of his most trusted advisors had been his greatest enemy. It was a lesson that would influence Napoleon's approach to governance for the remainder of his reign, as he struggled to balance the need for trusted advisors with the reality that power could corrupt even the most seemingly loyal servants. Story 2. The King's Justice. London, England, November 1536. Master Thomas Cromwell, Earl of Essex, and the King's principal secretary, stood at the window of his chamber in Westminster Palace, watching the November fog roll up from the Thames. At 51, he had risen from humble origins as a blacksmith's son to become one of the most powerful men in England, serving as King Henry VIII's chief minister and architect of the English Reformation. But power in Tudor England was precarious, and the letter in his hand suggested that enemies were gathering to bring about his downfall. The message had arrived that morning from Sir William Kingston, Constable of the Tower of London. My Lord Secretary, we have discovered a most grievous matter touching the King's safety. Sir Edmund Ashford, one of His Majesty's gentlemen pensioners, has been found dead in his chamber at Greenwich Palace. The circumstances suggest murder most foul, and there are indications that this death may be connected to treasonous activities against the crown. Cromwell understood the implications immediately. The gentlemen pensioners were the king's personal bodyguards, sworn to protect Henry VIII with their lives. If one of them had been murdered, it could indicate a plot against the king himself, or it could be part of a conspiracy to undermine Cromwell's own position by eliminating his supporters at court. The year 1536 had been tumultuous for England. Henry's marriage to Anne Boleyn had ended with her execution for adultery and treason, clearing the way for his marriage to Jane Seymour. The Pilgrimage of Grace, a massive Catholic uprising in the north, had nearly brought down the government before being suppressed with brutal efficiency. Throughout these crises, Cromwell had served as Henry's indispensable agent, implementing the king's will with ruthless pragmatism. But Cromwell's enemies were numerous and determined. The old nobility resented his low birth and rapid rise to power. Catholic loyalists blamed him for the break with Rome and the dissolution of the monasteries. Even Protestant reformers sometimes found his methods too moderate or too extreme for their tastes. Any one of these factions might have decided that murder was necessary to remove him from power. Cromwell summoned his most trusted assistant, Ralph Sadler, a young man of 30 who had served him faithfully for over a decade. Sadler combined intelligence with discretion, making him invaluable for sensitive missions that required both political understanding and personal loyalty. Ralph, we must investigate this matter at Greenwich with the utmost care. If Sir Edmund's death is connected to treason, we need to identify the conspirators before they can strike again. If it's part of a plot against me personally, we need to understand who our enemies are and what they're planning. My lord, shall I arrange for our usual investigators to examine the scene? No, this matter requires personal attention. We'll travel to Greenwich immediately and conduct the investigation ourselves. In matters touching the king's safety, we cannot trust anyone whose loyalties might be divided. The journey from Westminster to Greenwich Palace took them along the Thames, past the bustling wharves and merchant houses that reflected England's growing prosperity under Henry's reign. Greenwich Palace was one of the king's favorite residences, a magnificent complex where Henry had been born and where he frequently held court during the autumn months. Sir William Kingston met them at the palace gates, his weathered face reflecting the gravity of the situation. As Constable of the Tower, Kingston was responsible for the security of the realm's most important prisoners and had personally overseen the executions of Anne Boleyn and her alleged accomplices earlier that year. My Lord Secretary, the situation is most troubling. Sir Edmund was discovered dead in his chamber this morning by his servant, but the circumstances suggest he was murdered during the night. What evidence points to murder? The chamber door was locked from the inside, but there are signs that someone entered through the window. More significantly, Sir Edmund was found with a dagger wound to the chest, but no weapon was discovered in the room. This immediately suggested a sophisticated murder rather than a simple assault. The killer had not only gained access to a secured chamber, but had also removed the weapon to prevent immediate identification of the crime as homicide. Has anyone examined the body? Dr. William Butts, the king's physician, conducted a preliminary examination. He confirmed that the wound was fatal and that death occurred sometime after midnight. Dr. Butts was one of the most skilled physicians in England and could be trusted to provide accurate medical testimony. His involvement also indicated that the king was taking personal interest in the investigation. What do we know about Sir Edmund's activities before his death? He attended evening prayers in the chapel and then retired to his chamber around 10 o'clock. His servant heard no sounds of disturbance during the night. Who else had access to his chamber? As one of the gentlemen pensioners, Sir Edmund's quarters were in a secure section of the palace. Only members of the king's household and senior court officials would have had legitimate reasons to be in that area after dark. This narrowed the field of suspects considerably, but also made the investigation more politically sensitive. Anyone with access to Sir Edmund's chamber would be a person of importance whose accusation could have serious political consequences. Cromwell and Sadler examined Sir Edmund's chamber carefully. The room was spartanly furnished, reflecting the military background of its occupant, but several details caught Cromwell's attention. Papers scattered on the writing table, an overturned inkwell, and scratches on the window frame that suggested forced entry. Ralph, examine those papers. I want to know what Sir Edmund was working on before his death. The documents revealed that Sir Edmund had been investigating rumors of a Catholic conspiracy to restore papal authority in England. His notes mentioned meetings between prominent Catholic nobles and foreign agents, along with concerns about weapons being smuggled into the country from the continent. My lord, it appears Sir Edmund had uncovered evidence of a plot against the religious settlement. These notes mention several names of courtiers who may have been involved in treasonous activities. Cromwell studied the list of names with growing concern. They included some of the most powerful nobles in England: Thomas Howard, Duke of Norfolk; Henry Courtenay, Marquis of Exeter; and Sir Geoffrey Pole, brother of the exiled Cardinal Reginald Pole, who had become one of Henry's most vocal critics abroad. These are dangerous accusations, Ralph. If Sir Edmund was preparing to present evidence against these men, any one of them would have strong motives for silencing him permanently. But my lord, how could they have gained access to his chamber without being observed? That's what we need to determine. Sir Edmund's murder was carried out by someone with detailed knowledge of the palace layout and the ability to move through secure areas without attracting attention. Their investigation was interrupted by the arrival of Dr. William Butts, who had completed his examination of the body. The royal physician was a learned man who combined medical expertise with discretion, making him valuable to both Henry and Cromwell in sensitive matters. My Lord Secretary, I have completed my examination of Sir Edmund's remains. The wound was inflicted by a narrow blade, probably a stiletto or similar weapon designed for assassination. What can you tell us about the killer? The angle and depth of the wound suggests someone of average height with considerable strength. The precision of the strike indicates familiarity with anatomy, possibly someone with military or medical training. Any other evidence on the body? There were defensive wounds on Sir Edmund's hands, indicating he fought his attacker, but there was also evidence that he had been drugged before the attack. Drugged? I found traces of a sedative substance in his system, probably administered in wine or food to make him less capable of defending himself. This revelation added another dimension to the investigation. The killer had not only planned the murder carefully, but had also ensured that the victim would be incapacitated during the attack. Dr. Butts, who would have access to such substances? Physicians certainly, but also apothecaries and anyone with knowledge of herbal medicine. The substance used was probably extracted from poppy or similar plants. Cromwell realized they were dealing with a sophisticated conspiracy rather than a simple murder. The use of drugs, the careful planning, and the political implications all pointed to a well-organized plot with significant resources and expertise. Ralph, we need to identify everyone who had contact with Sir Edmund in the days before his death. I want to know who he spoke with, what he ate, and where he obtained any food or drink. Their investigation revealed that Sir Edmund had been approached by several individuals in recent days, each claiming to have information about the Catholic conspiracy he was investigating. These contacts included Lady Mary Howard, the Duke of Norfolk's daughter; Father Robert Aske, a priest who claimed to have repented of his involvement in the Pilgrimage of Grace; and Master Stephen Gardiner, Bishop of Winchester and a powerful conservative voice in the English Church. Each of these individuals had both the motive and the opportunity to murder Sir Edmund if they were indeed involved in treasonous activities. But proving their guilt would require careful investigation and solid evidence that would stand up in court. Cromwell decided to interview each suspect personally, using his authority as the king's principal secretary to demand cooperation. His first meeting was with Lady Mary Howard, who received him in her chambers at Greenwich Palace. Lady Mary was a woman of perhaps 25, with the aristocratic bearing and careful manner of someone raised in the dangerous world of Tudor court politics. As the daughter of the Duke of Norfolk, she had witnessed the rise and fall of numerous courtiers and understood the importance of choosing words carefully. My Lady Mary, I understand you spoke with Sir Edmund Ashford recently about matters concerning your family's loyalty to the crown. My Lord Secretary, my family has always served the king faithfully. If Sir Edmund had concerns about our loyalty, they were based on misunderstandings or malicious rumors. What kind of misunderstandings? There have been suggestions that my father's opposition to some religious reforms indicates disloyalty to His Majesty. But the Duke of Norfolk serves the king's interests regardless of his personal religious convictions. Did you meet with Sir Edmund to provide him with information about alleged Catholic conspiracies? I met with him to clarify our family's position and to correct any misconceptions he might have developed about our activities. What was Sir Edmund's response to your explanations? Lady Mary hesitated before answering. He seemed skeptical of our protestations of loyalty. Sir Edmund appeared to believe that anyone who questioned the religious reforms was potentially treasonous. Did you provide him with food or drink during your meeting? We shared wine while discussing these matters. It's customary hospitality. This was potentially significant. If Lady Mary had drugged the wine, it could explain how Sir Edmund had been incapacitated before his murder. My lady, where were you on the night Sir Edmund was killed? In my chambers, attended by my servants. Several can confirm my presence throughout the night. Cromwell made note of the alibi, but knew that aristocratic women often had the resources to arrange for crimes to be committed by others while maintaining their own apparent innocence. His next interview was with Father Robert Aske, the priest who claimed to have renounced his involvement in the Pilgrimage of Grace. Aske was a man of perhaps 40, with the gaunt appearance of someone who had endured hardship and the nervous manner of someone who knew his life depended on royal mercy. Father Aske, you approached Sir Edmund with information about continued Catholic resistance to the king's religious policies. Yes, my lord. I sought to demonstrate my loyalty to His Majesty by providing intelligence about those who continue to oppose the royal supremacy. What kind of intelligence? Names of priests and nobles who are secretly working to restore papal authority in England. I hoped that by exposing these traitors, I could prove my own repentance for my past mistakes. Did Sir Edmund believe your claims of repentance? He was suspicious, naturally. Many who claim to have reformed their religious opinions are merely seeking to avoid punishment while continuing their treasonous activities. What information did you provide to him? I gave him names of several prominent courtiers who I knew were in communication with Cardinal Pole and other English exiles abroad. Did these names include members of the Howard family? Father Aske hesitated. I prefer not to make specific accusations without absolute proof, but yes, certain members of prominent Catholic families were mentioned. Father, did you provide Sir Edmund with any food or drink during your meetings? I offered him ale as any host would. We met in my lodgings near the palace. Another potential source of the drugs found in Sir Edmund's system, Cromwell noted that both Lady Mary and Father Aske had provided the victim with refreshments that could have been used to administer sedatives. Where were you on the night of Sir Edmund's murder? In my lodgings, preparing sermons for the coming week. I live alone, so I cannot provide witnesses to confirm my presence. The lack of an alibi made Father Aske a more serious suspect, especially given his desperate need to prove his loyalty to avoid execution for his role in the Pilgrimage of Grace. Cromwell's final interview was with Bishop Stephen Gardiner, one of the most powerful and controversial figures in the English Church. Gardiner was a skilled politician who had managed to survive the religious upheavals by carefully balancing his conservative theological views with public support for the king's policies. The bishop received Cromwell in his private chambers, surrounded by theological books and official documents that reflected his dual role as religious leader and government administrator. My Lord Secretary, this business with Sir Edmund is most regrettable. He was a faithful servant of the crown. Bishop Gardiner, I understand Sir Edmund consulted with you about suspected Catholic conspiracies at court. Sir Edmund was concerned about rumors of continued papal influence among certain courtiers. I advised him to be careful about making accusations without solid evidence. Did he provide you with names of suspected conspirators? He mentioned several individuals, but acknowledged that his evidence was largely circumstantial. I counseled patience and further investigation before bringing such serious charges. What was your assessment of his claims? I believed Sir Edmund was sincere in his concerns, but I feared he might be seeing conspiracies where none existed. The religious changes have created suspicions and divisions that sometimes lead to false accusations. Bishop, did you provide Sir Edmund with any refreshments during your meetings? We shared wine from my personal cellar. I always offer hospitality to visitors. A third potential source of the sedative drugs. Cromwell was beginning to see a pattern. Each suspect had provided Sir Edmund with food or drink that could have been used to incapacitate him. Where were you on the night Sir Edmund was murdered? In my chambers, working on correspondence with other bishops regarding church administration. My secretaries can confirm my presence. Bishop Gardiner's alibi seems stronger than those of the other suspects, But Cromwell knew that powerful men often had the resources to arrange crimes while maintaining their own apparent innocence. After completing his interviews, Cromwell reviewed the evidence with Sadler. Each suspect had motive, opportunity, and means to commit the murder. But none of the evidence was conclusive enough to justify an accusation of treason. Ralph, we're dealing with a sophisticated conspiracy that involves multiple individuals with different roles and motivations. The question is whether they're working together or whether one of them is manipulating the others. My lord, the use of sedative drugs suggests medical or herbal knowledge. Of our three suspects, Bishop Gardner would be most likely to have access to such substances through his connections with monastic libraries and scholarly networks. But Lady Mary Howard has the strongest political motive. Her family's position depends on preventing exposure of their continued Catholic sympathies. And Father Ask is desperate enough to commit murder to prove his loyalty and avoid execution. Their discussion was interrupted by the arrival of a messenger with urgent news. Sir Geoffrey Pole, one of the men mentioned in Sir Edmund's notes, had attempted to flee England during the night. He had been captured at Dover while trying to board a ship for France. This suggests that someone warned the conspirators about Sir Edmund's investigation, Cromwell observed. Pole's attempted escape indicates guilt and implies that the other suspects knew they were under investigation. Shall we arrest all three suspects, my lord? Not yet. Pole's capture may provide us with the evidence we need to identify the actual murderer. Let's see what he reveals under interrogation. Sir Geoffrey Pole was brought to the Tower of London for questioning, where Kingston's interrogators would use whatever methods were necessary to extract the truth. As Cardinal Pole's brother, Geoffrey was already suspected of treasonous sympathies, and his attempted escape had effectively confirmed his guilt. Under interrogation, Pole revealed the existence of a Catholic conspiracy aimed at restoring papal authority in England through foreign invasion and internal rebellion. The plot involved several prominent nobles and had been coordinated through secret meetings and coded correspondence. More significantly, Pole confessed that Sir Edmund Ashford had indeed uncovered evidence of the conspiracy and had been preparing to present his findings to the king. The conspirators had decided that he had to be eliminated to prevent exposure of their activities. Who was responsible for Sir Edmund's murder? Cromwell demanded. The decision was made collectively, but the actual deed was carried out by Father Ask. He volunteered to kill Sir Edmund to prove his loyalty to our cause and to eliminate suspicion about his own involvement. How was the murder accomplished? Ask met with Sir Edmund and provided him with drugged ale to incapacitate him. Then he returned during the night and gained entry through the window to complete the killing. What about Lady Mary Howard and Bishop Gardner? Lady Mary provided information about Sir Edmund's investigation, while Bishop Gardner supplied the sedative drugs through his knowledge of herbal medicine. But neither was directly involved in the murder itself. This confession provided Cromwell with the evidence he needed to make arrests and prosecutions. Father Ask was clearly guilty of murder, while Lady Mary and Bishop Gardner could be charged with conspiracy and accessory to treason. But Cromwell also realized that the conspiracy extended beyond these immediate suspects. Pole's revelations suggested a broader Catholic plot that involved foreign agents and additional English nobles who had not yet been identified. Ralph, we need to move quickly to arrest the conspirators before they can flee or destroy evidence. But we also need to investigate the broader implications of this plot. The arrests were carried out simultaneously to prevent the suspects from warning each other or coordinating their defenses. Father Ask was taken at his lodgings, Lady Mary Howard at Greenwich Palace, and Bishop Gardner at his residence in Winchester. All three confessed under interrogation, confirming Pole's account of the conspiracy and providing additional details about the broader Catholic plot against the king's religious policies. Father Ask admitted to murdering Sir Edmund, explaining that he had been promised a prominent position in the restored Catholic Church if the conspiracy succeeded. His apparent repentance for his role in the Pilgrimage of Grace had been a deception designed to gain access to government intelligence. Lady Mary Howard confessed to providing information about court activities and helping to coordinate communications between the conspirators. Her family's position had made her valuable as an intelligence source and a conduit for secret messages. Bishop Gardner initially denied involvement, but eventually admitted to providing the drugs used to incapacitate Sir Edmund and to offering advice about how to eliminate the threat he posed to the conspiracy. The broader investigation revealed that the Catholic plot had been more extensive than initially suspected. Foreign agents from France and the Holy Roman Empire had been providing financial support and strategic guidance, while English exiles like Cardinal Pole had been coordinating activities from abroad. The conspiracy had planned to coordinate a foreign invasion with internal rebellion, using England's Catholic population as a base of support for overthrowing Henry's government and restoring papal authority. Sir Edmund Ashford's investigation had threatened to expose this plot before it could be implemented, making his murder necessary from the conspirators' perspective. The trials of the conspirators were conducted with the efficiency and brutality typical of Tudor justice. Father Aske was executed for murder and treason, while Lady Mary Howard and Bishop Gardiner were sentenced to death for conspiracy against the crown. However, Bishop Gardiner's sentence was commuted to imprisonment due to his ecclesiastical status and his cooperation in revealing additional details about the conspiracy. He would eventually be pardoned and restored to favor under Queen Mary I. Sir Geoffrey Pole was also executed, along with several other nobles who were implicated in the broader Catholic conspiracy. The Duke of Norfolk, despite his daughter's involvement, managed to avoid direct implication and retained his position at court through careful political maneuvering. The investigation and trials strengthened Cromwell's position as Henry's chief minister and demonstrated his effectiveness in protecting the king's interests. The exposure of the Catholic conspiracy justified the harsh measures taken against religious dissidents and validated the government's suspicions about continued papal influence in England. For Cromwell personally, the case confirmed his understanding that survival in Tudor England required constant vigilance against enemies who might use any means necessary to achieve their political goals. Sir Edmund's murder had been intended not only to protect a specific conspiracy, but also to undermine the religious settlement that Cromwell had helped to create. The case also illustrated the complex relationships between religion, politics, and personal ambition in Tudor England. Each of the conspirators had been motivated by a different combination of religious conviction, political calculation, and personal desperation. Father Aske's apparent conversion to Protestantism had been a complete deception, motivated by his desire to avoid execution for his role in the Pilgrimage of Grace. Lady Mary Howard had been protecting her family's position while secretly supporting the Catholic cause. Bishop Gardiner had been trying to balance his conservative theological views with his need to maintain political influence. The investigation techniques used by Cromwell and Sadler, careful examination of physical evidence, systematic interviewing of suspects, and coordination of multiple arrests, represented some of the most sophisticated police work of the Tudor period. Their success in solving Sir Edmund's murder and exposing the broader conspiracy demonstrated the effectiveness of methodical investigation over the more common reliance on confessions extracted through torture. The case became a model for future investigations of treason and conspiracy, showing how careful analysis of motives, opportunities, and physical evidence could uncover complex plots that might otherwise remain hidden. For King Henry VIII, the exposure of the Catholic conspiracy confirmed his fears about continued threats to his religious and political authority. The harsh response to the conspirators sent a clear message that opposition to the royal supremacy would be met with decisive punishment. The investigation also highlighted the international dimensions of domestic political conflicts. The involvement of foreign agents and English exiles showed how religious and political disputes within England were connected to broader European power struggles. Thomas Cromwell's handling of the case enhanced his reputation as an effective administrator and loyal servant of the crown. His ability to uncover and defeat the conspiracy demonstrated his value to Henry VIII and helped to secure his position as the king's chief minister. However, Cromwell was also aware that his enemies would not abandon their efforts to bring about his downfall. The exposure of this particular conspiracy had eliminated some threats, but had probably created new ones as his surviving opponents sought alternative methods of achieving their goals. In his private correspondence, Cromwell reflected on the lessons learned from Sir Edmund's murder. The king's justice requires constant vigilance against those who would use violence and deception to advance their political goals. In defending the crown's interests, we must be prepared to face enemies who will stop at nothing to achieve their objectives. The case of Sir Edmund Ashford's murder became part of the dark legend of Tudor England, where political disagreement could quickly escalate to conspiracy, treason, and death. It served as a reminder that even in the magnificent palaces of Henry VIII's court, Danger lurked behind every smile, and loyalty could never be taken for granted. The king's justice had been served, but at a cost that reflected the brutal realities of Tudor politics. In protecting the crown and the religious settlement, Cromwell had demonstrated both his effectiveness as an administrator and his willingness to use whatever methods were necessary to defend the king's interests. The investigation had also revealed the complex web of relationships, rivalries, and ambitions that characterized the Tudor court. Personal loyalties, religious convictions, and political calculations interacted in ways that could produce unexpected alliances and sudden betrayals. For the surviving members of the court, Sir Edmund's murder served as a stark reminder of the consequences of opposition to the king's will. Henry VIII's England was a place where political miscalculation could lead to the scaffold, and where survival required careful navigation of the treacherous waters of Tudor politics. Story 3. The Berlin Shadows. Berlin, German Republic, December 1923 Criminal Commissar Ernst Gennett pulled his wool overcoat tighter against the bitter December wind as he walked through the snow-covered streets of Berlin toward the Alexanderplatz police headquarters. At 43, he had served as head of the city's murder commission for 5 years, witnessing the transformation of Germany from imperial power to defeated republic to a nation teetering on the edge of chaos. The hyperinflation that had destroyed the German currency meant that a loaf of bread now cost billions of marks, while political extremists from both left and right battled for control of the streets. The telephone call that had summoned him from his modest apartment near Potsdamer Platz had been brief but alarming. "Herr Kommissar, we have discovered a body at the Kaiserhof Hotel. The victim appears to be a foreign diplomat, and the circumstances suggest this may be connected to the current political crisis." The Kaiserhof Hotel was one of Berlin's most prestigious establishments, a place where foreign diplomats, wealthy businessmen, and influential politicians conducted the discreet negotiations that shaped Germany's uncertain future. A murder there could have international implications that went far beyond ordinary criminal investigation. Gennett had built his reputation by applying scientific methods to criminal investigation, pioneering the use of photography, fingerprinting, and systematic analysis of crime scenes. His methods had proven particularly valuable in the chaos of post-war Berlin, where traditional authority had collapsed and new forms of crime flourished alongside political violence. The city itself reflected Germany's fractured condition. Elegant boulevards and grand buildings stood alongside makeshift shanties housing refugees from the lost Eastern territories. Nightclubs and cabarets offered escape from economic hardship, while breadlines and political demonstrations reminded everyone of the nation's precarious situation. In this environment, murder could have political, economic, or personal motives, and often all three simultaneously. At police headquarters, Gennett was met by his assistant, Oberinspector Karl Zorgebel, a methodical investigator who had worked with him since before the war. Zorgebel's experience with both criminal cases and political surveillance made him invaluable in understanding the complex relationships that characterized Weimar Berlin's elite circles. Herr Kommissar, the victim is Count Viktor Batthyány, a Hungarian diplomat who has been in Berlin for several weeks negotiating trade agreements with the German government. Any obvious motive for his murder? Count Batthyány was involved in sensitive negotiations regarding German reparations payments and the stabilization of the mark. Several parties had strong interest in the success or failure of these talks. This immediately raised the stakes of the investigation. The German economy was in freefall, with the government printing money to meet reparations payments demanded by the victorious Allies. Any diplomatic initiative that might stabilize the situation would be welcomed by some parties and opposed by others who profited from the chaos. What do we know about the circumstances of his death? The Count was found in his hotel suite early this morning by a chambermaid. He had been shot once in the chest, apparently while sitting at his writing desk. There were no signs of robbery, and his diplomatic papers appeared to have been searched, but not taken. Any witnesses? The hotel staff reported seeing several visitors to the Count's suite yesterday evening, but the descriptions are vague. The Kaiserhof caters to a discreet clientele, and the staff are trained not to pay too much attention to their guests' activities. Gennett and Zorgebel made their way through the crowded streets to the Kaiserhof Hotel. Despite the economic crisis, The hotel maintained its reputation for luxury and discretion, serving as a neutral meeting ground for the various factions competing for influence in the New Germany. The hotel manager, Herr Wilhelm Adlon, received them in his office with the nervous courtesy of someone accustomed to handling sensitive situations. The Kaiserhof's success depended on maintaining the confidence of powerful guests, and a murder investigation threatened to damage that reputation. Herr Kommissar, this is a most regrettable incident. Count Bathiani was a valued guest who always conducted himself with perfect propriety. We understand the Count had several visitors yesterday evening. Can you provide names or descriptions? Our policy is to protect our guests' privacy, but given the circumstances, there were at least 3 individuals who called on the Count. A German businessman named Herr Steenis, a lady who gave her name as Frau Weber, and a gentleman who spoke with an American accent but provided no name. Hugo Stins was one of Germany's most powerful industrialists, a man who had actually profited from the hyperinflation by converting his debts into worthless currency while acquiring real assets. His presence at the hotel suggested that the Count's negotiations involved significant business interests. Did any of these visitors seem agitated or hostile? Herr Steinitz appeared quite animated during his discussion with the Count. We could hear raised voices from the corridor, though, of course, we didn't listen to the actual conversation. What about the American gentleman? He seemed nervous and kept looking around as if he was concerned about being observed. He carried a briefcase and stayed for about an hour. And Frau Weber? An elegant lady, perhaps 40 years old, well-dressed and obviously educated. She arrived last and stayed the longest, nearly 2 hours. Count Bathiani's suite was on the hotel's 4th floor, overlooking Unter den Linden Boulevard. The accommodation reflected the Count's diplomatic status. Spacious rooms furnished with the latest luxury, including electric lighting and a private telephone. The Count's body had been positioned at his writing desk, as if he had been working when shot. But Gennett's experienced eye noticed several inconsistencies that suggested the scene had been arranged after the murder. Zorgebel examined the position of the chair and the papers on the desk. Something isn't right about this arrangement. A closer examination revealed that the Count had been shot while standing near the window, then moved to the desk to create the impression that he had been killed while working. Blood spatter patterns on the carpet confirmed that the initial shooting had occurred several feet from where the body was discovered. Why would the killer rearrange the scene? Sorgebel wondered. Perhaps to suggest that the Count was killed for his diplomatic papers, rather than for personal or political reasons, or to buy time by making the death appear less suspicious initially. Gennett examined the Count's papers carefully. The documents related to complex negotiations involving German reparations, international loans, and trade agreements that could potentially stabilize the German economy. But several pages appeared to be missing from what should have been a complete set of diplomatic correspondence. The killer was looking for specific documents rather than stealing everything. This suggests someone with detailed knowledge of the Count's work. The telephone in the suite provided another clue. The hotel operator reported that the Count had made several calls on the evening of his death, including contacts with the German Foreign Ministry, a Berlin bank, and a private number that belonged to someone named Fischer. Find out who this Fischer is, Gennett instructed Zorgebel, and arrange interviews with Steinitz, the mysterious American, and Frau Weber. Their investigation began with Hugo Steinitz, whom they found at his corporate headquarters near Potsdamer Platz. Steinitz was a heavy-set man in his 50s, with the confident manner of someone who had built a vast industrial empire through shrewd dealing and political connections. Herr Kommissar, Count Bathiani's death is a great loss to German-Hungarian relations. He was a skilled negotiator who understood the complexities of our current economic situation. We understand you met with the Count yesterday evening. What was the nature of your discussion? We were exploring possibilities for Hungarian investment in German industry. The Count's government was interested in acquiring German industrial equipment in exchange for agricultural products. Hotel staff reported that your conversation became heated. What caused the disagreement? Steinitz hesitated before answering. The Count was concerned about the political stability necessary for long-term business relationships. I assured him that Germany's current difficulties were temporary, but he remained skeptical. Did your negotiations involve the missing diplomatic documents we found evidence of in his suite? The Count showed me some preliminary agreements, but nothing was finalized. I have no idea what happened to his papers after I left. Herr Steines, where were you after leaving the hotel? I returned to my office to review some contracts, then went home to my family. My driver and secretary can confirm my movements. Despite his apparent cooperation, Gennett sensed that Steines was concealing important information about his meeting with the Count. The industrialist business empire depended on political connections that could be threatened by the wrong kind of diplomatic agreements. Their next interview was with the mysterious Fischer, who turned out to be Dr. Rudolf Fischer, a former government official who now worked as a private financial consultant. They found him at his office in the financial district, a modest establishment that contrasted sharply with Steins's corporate headquarters. Dr. Fischer was a thin man in his 40s, with the worried expression of someone trying to navigate Germany's economic chaos. His office was filled with charts tracking currency exchange rates and files documenting the hyperinflation's devastating effects on German businesses. Dr. Fischer, you spoke with Count Battiani by telephone on the evening of his death. What was the subject of your conversation? The Count was seeking advice about currency stabilization measures that might be included in international agreements with Germany. As a former Treasury official, I had experience with such matters. What kind of advice did you provide? I warned him that any agreements involving German currency would need to account for the continuing inflation. Standard diplomatic language about fixed exchange rates was meaningless under current conditions. Did the Count seem concerned about threats to his safety? He mentioned receiving pressure from various parties regarding his negotiations. Some wanted him to proceed quickly with agreements, while others urged caution or outright cancellation of the talks. What kind of pressure? Both political and economic. The Count felt caught between Hungarian interests, German government priorities, and private business concerns that didn't necessarily align with diplomatic objectives. Dr. Fischer, did you meet with the Count in person during his stay in Berlin? No. Our contact was limited to telephone conversations and written correspondence. I sent him some economic analyses, but we never met face to face. The financial consultant seemed genuinely concerned about the Count's death and provided useful background about the economic complexities surrounding the diplomatic negotiations. But Gennett noted that Fischer had detailed knowledge of the Count's activities that could have come only from extensive surveillance or inside information. Identifying Frau Weber proved more challenging. The name was obviously false, and the hotel's description was generic enough to match hundreds of women in Berlin. But Zorgobel's investigation of the city's diplomatic and social circles eventually produced a lead. Herr Kommissar, I believe Frau Weber is actually Mata Hari's former associate, Elena Voronova, a Russian emigre who works as a courier for various intelligence services. Elena Voronova was indeed a fascinating figure, a former aristocrat who had fled Russia after the revolution and now made her living in the shadowy world of international espionage. Her services were reportedly available to the highest bidder, whether German, French, British, or American intelligence agencies. They found her at the Café Einstein, a bohemian establishment popular with artists, intellectuals, and the various refugees who had made Berlin their temporary home. Voronova was an elegant woman in her late 30s, with the sophisticated manner of someone who had moved in the highest circles of European society. Frau Voronova, we understand you visited Count Battiani at the Kaiserhof Hotel under the name Frau Weber. I occasionally use different names for professional reasons, Herr Kommissar. In my line of work, discretion is essential. What line of work would that be? I facilitate communication between parties who prefer not to meet directly. In the current political climate, such services are often necessary. Who were you representing in your meeting with Count Battiani? I'm not at liberty to discuss my clients' identities, but I can tell you that the Count was involved in negotiations that interested several different parties. What was the nature of your discussion with him? I delivered some documents and received others in return. The Count was serving as an intermediary in talks that went beyond the official diplomatic negotiations. What kind of talks? Arrangements for private loans that could help stabilize the German currency. Such agreements would benefit some interests while potentially harming others. This suggested that Count Battiani had been involved in secret financial negotiations that paralleled his official diplomatic work. If he had been arranging private loans to support the German economy, it could explain why various parties might want to stop him. Frau Voronova, did the Count seem concerned about his safety during your meeting? He mentioned receiving threats from parties who opposed his activities. The Count was a brave man, but he understood the risks of his work. What kind of threats? Both political extremists and business interests had reasons to oppose currency stabilization. The Count's success could have damaged the profits of those who benefit from economic chaos. Where were you after leaving the hotel? I returned to my apartment and spent the evening reviewing documents for other clients. I live alone, so I cannot provide witnesses to confirm my whereabouts. Elena Voronova's answers were carefully crafted to provide information while protecting her clients' identities. But her admission that the Count had been arranging private loans added a new dimension to the investigation. The mysterious American visitor proved to be James Speyer, a representative of American banking interests who had been in Berlin exploring investment opportunities. They found him at the Hotel Adlon, preparing to return to New York following the Count's death. Speyer was a man in his 50s, with the professional manner of someone accustomed to high-stakes financial negotiations. His presence in Berlin reflected American interest in helping to stabilize the German economy for both humanitarian and business reasons. Mr. Speyer, we understand you met with Count Battiani to discuss financial matters. The Count was exploring possibilities for international loans that could help end the hyperinflation crisis. American banks are interested in supporting German economic recovery. What specific arrangements were under discussion? Private loans secured by German industrial assets, with repayment terms tied to currency stabilization measures. Such loans could provide the backing needed to establish a stable German currency. Who opposed these arrangements? Various parties had different concerns. Some German industrialists worried about foreign control of their assets. Political extremists opposed any measures that might strengthen the current government, and some international interests profited from German economic weakness. Did Count Battiani seem concerned about threats to his safety? He mentioned receiving pressure from parties who wanted to prevent the loan arrangements, but the Count was committed to helping Germany recover from its economic crisis. Mr. Speyer, where were you after leaving the Count's hotel suite? I returned to my hotel and worked on reports for my employers in New York. The hotel staff can confirm my presence throughout the evening. Speyer's account corroborated the other witnesses' descriptions of the Count's activities, but it also revealed the high stakes involved in the negotiations. Private American loans could indeed help stabilize the German economy, but they would also create new dependencies and power relationships that various parties might want to prevent. As Gennett and Zorgabo reviewed the evidence, a complex picture emerged of the Count's final days. He had been involved in both official diplomatic negotiations and secret financial arrangements that could have transformed Germany's economic situation. But his activities had also created enemies among those who benefited from the current chaos. Zorgabel, we have multiple suspects with different motives, but the key question is, who had access to the specific information needed to plan this murder? The killer knew about the Count's schedule, his visitors, and the documents he was carrying. That suggests someone with inside knowledge of his activities. Their breakthrough came when they discovered that Dr. Fisher had been providing information about the Count's activities to multiple parties, including some who had been opposed to the loan negotiations. Fisher has been playing all sides, Gennett realized. He provided financial advice to the Count while also informing his enemies about the progress of the negotiations. But Fisher's role as an informant didn't necessarily make him the murderer. The actual killing required someone with the motive, opportunity, and means to carry out the crime. The solution came when Gennett noticed inconsistencies in Hugo Stinz's alibi. The industrialist claimed to have returned to his office after meeting with the Count, but building security records showed that he had actually returned to the office much later than he claimed. Stennis had time to return to the hotel and commit the murder, Gennett concluded, and he had strong motives for preventing the loan agreements from proceeding. Further investigation revealed that Stennis had been secretly profiting from the hyperinflation by acquiring assets with devalued currency. The American loans would have stabilized the mark and ended his opportunities for such profitable speculation. When confronted with the evidence, Stennis initially denied involvement, but eventually confessed to the murder. Count Battiani was going to destroy the opportunities that the current economic situation provides for those clever enough to exploit them, Stennis explained. His loan arrangements would have ended the inflation that allows smart businessmen to acquire real assets with worthless paper money. So you killed him to protect your profits? I killed him to protect German independence. Foreign loans would have made Germany a client state of American banks. This rationalization failed to disguise the fundamentally economic motive for the crime. Stennis had murdered the Count to preserve his ability to profit from Germany's economic misery. The investigation also revealed that Elena Voronova had been working for Stennis, providing him with intelligence about the Count's activities while pretending to facilitate the loan negotiations. Her role as a double agent had made the murder possible by giving Stennis advanced knowledge of the Count's schedule and activities. Dr. Fisher had been an unwitting accomplice, providing financial information that Stennis used to understand the implications of the Count's negotiations. The former government official had genuinely believed he was helping to stabilize the German economy, not facilitating murder. James Speyer had been an innocent party whose legitimate business activities had provided cover for the conspiracy. His presence in Berlin had given Stennis and Voronova the opportunity to pose as supporters of the loan arrangements while actually working to sabotage them. The trial of Hugo Stennis became a sensation in Berlin, highlighting the moral corruption that had accompanied Germany's economic crisis. The revelation that one of the country's most successful businessmen had committed murder to preserve his profits shocked even a population accustomed to political violence and economic chaos. Stennis was convicted of murder and sentenced to death, though his sentence was later commuted to life imprisonment due to his age and previous contributions to German industry. Elena Voronova fled Berlin before she could be arrested and disappeared into the international underworld of espionage and intrigue. Dr. Fisher was cleared of criminal charges but resigned from his consulting practice in disgrace. His reputation as a financial expert was destroyed by the revelation that he had been manipulated by the actual conspirators. The Count's death ended the private loan negotiations he had been arranging, contributing to the continued instability of the German economy. The hyperinflation crisis would eventually be resolved through other means, but the opportunity for earlier stabilization had been lost through murder and conspiracy. For Gennett, the case demonstrated the complex relationships between crime, politics, and economics in Weimar Germany. Traditional criminal motives of greed, revenge, and passion had been complicated by the political and economic chaos that characterized the era. In times of crisis, ordinary criminals become political actors, and political conflicts become criminal conspiracies, he observed in his case report. The investigator must understand not only individual psychology, but also the broader social forces that drive human behavior. The case also highlighted the international dimensions of domestic German politics. The Count's murder had been motivated by opposition to foreign financial involvement, but it had been carried out through a network that included Russian émigrés and American businessmen. Berlin in 1923 was indeed a city of shadows, where legitimate business, political extremism, and criminal activity intersected in ways that made traditional law enforcement inadequate. Gennett's scientific methods had solved the Count's murder, but the broader problems that made such crimes possible remained unresolved. The investigation established Gennett's reputation as one of Europe's most skilled criminal investigators, but it also revealed the limitations of police work in addressing the systemic problems that created conditions for political violence and economic crime. In his private notes, Gennett reflected on the broader implications of the case. The murder of Count Battiani was both a criminal act and a political statement. The killer sought not only to eliminate a specific individual, but to prevent changes that might have benefited Germany as a whole. In investigating such crimes, we confront not only individual evil, but the social forces that make such evil possible. The Berlin shadows that had concealed the conspiracy against Count Battiani would continue to hide other plots and crimes as Germany struggled with the political and economic instability that would ultimately contribute to the rise of extremist movements and the end of the Weimar Republic. But Gennett's methods had proven that even in the most complex political environment, careful investigation could uncover the truth and bring criminals to justice. His work had helped to maintain the rule of law during one of the most chaotic periods in German history, providing a foundation for the democratic institutions that Germany would eventually rebuild after the disasters that lay ahead. The case of Count Victor Battiani remained in Gennett's files as a reminder of how individual crimes could reflect broader social and political conflicts, and of the investigator's responsibility to seek truth regardless of the powerful interests that might be threatened by its revelation. Story 4. The Khan's Justice. Khan Balik, Beijing, Yuan Dynasty, China. 23rd year of Kublai Khan's reign, 1287 AD. Jamuka the investigator pulled his deal coat tighter against the bitter winter wind as he rode through the snow-covered streets of Khan Balik toward the imperial palace. At 39, he served as one of the great Khan's most trusted judicial officials, responsible for investigating crimes that touched upon the complex, religious, cultural, and political life of the largest empire in human history. The silk scroll that had summoned him from his morning prayers bore the imperial seal and urgent characters in Mongolian script. A matter of grave importance has occurred that threatens the harmony of the empire. Marco Polo, the Venetian merchant and servant of the Khan, has been found dead under circumstances that suggest neither accident nor natural causes. Marco Polo's death was indeed significant beyond ordinary criminal investigation. The Venetian had served Kublai Khan for over 15 years as an administrator, diplomat, and cultural interpreter, helping to bridge the vast differences between Mongol, Chinese, Persian, and European traditions within the empire. His murder could have implications for the delicate balance of interests that held together a realm stretching from Korea to Eastern Europe. Khan Balik in 1287 was perhaps the most cosmopolitan city in the world, the capital of an empire that governed over 100 million people from dozens of different cultures, religions, and linguistic groups. The city's population of nearly 1 million included Mongols, Chinese, Persians, Arabs, Europeans, and representatives of every major civilization from the Pacific to the Atlantic. Jamuka had risen from the traditional Mongol warrior class to become one of the empire's most effective investigators through his mastery of multiple languages, his understanding of different legal traditions, and his ability to navigate the complex cultural dynamics that characterize Mongol administration. His work required not only solving crimes, but also maintaining the cultural harmony that made the empire's diverse population governable. The investigation would be particularly sensitive because Marco Polo's position had made him both valuable and controversial within the imperial court. As a foreigner who had achieved high rank through merit rather than birth, he represented both the opportunities and the tensions that characterized the Mongol system of multicultural governance. The imperial palace complex was a magnificent synthesis of Mongol, Chinese, and Persian architectural traditions, reflecting Kublai Khan's vision of an empire that could incorporate the best elements of all conquered civilizations. The buildings combined the practical efficiency of Mongol design with the aesthetic sophistication of Chinese craftsmanship and the mathematical precision of Islamic engineering. Jamuka was met at the palace entrance by Bayan, the Minister of Justice, whose administrative duties included coordinating investigations that involved multiple cultural and legal systems. Bayan was a Mongol of 50 with the practical manner and multilingual skills that characterized the empire's administrative elite. Jamuka, this matter requires both discretion and efficiency. Marco Polo's death could affect not only our relationships with European traders, but also the internal balance between different cultural factions within the court. Minister Bayan, what evidence suggests that Marco Polo was murdered rather than dying from natural causes? The Venetian was found in his private quarters with signs that suggest poisoning, according to the court physicians who examined the body. More significantly, his personal papers appear to have been searched, and certain documents related to his administrative duties are missing. What kind of administrative duties? Marco Polo had been serving as an inspector of the empire's trade routes and taxation systems, with particular responsibility for monitoring the activities of foreign merchants and administrators in key commercial centers. This role could have created numerous enemies among those who might have been engaged in corruption, smuggling, or other illegal activities that Marco Polo's investigations could have exposed. Minister, who else knew about the specific nature of his investigative work? His duties were known to senior administrators in the Ministry of Revenue, commanders responsible for trade route security, and certain members of the Khan's personal council who advised on commercial policy. Jamuka examined Marco Polo's quarters, which reflected both his status as a high imperial official and his European origins. The rooms were elegantly furnished with objects that demonstrated his travels throughout the empire: Chinese silk hangings, Persian carpets, Central Asian metalwork, and European manuscripts that created an atmosphere of cosmopolitan sophistication. The Venetian's body lay in his private study positioned as if he had been working at his writing desk when he died. Marco Polo was a man of 33, with the lean build and weathered complexion of someone who had spent years traveling the empire's vast territories. His death appeared peaceful, showing none of the signs of struggle that would characterize violent assault. The court physician, a Chinese doctor named Li Wei, who combined traditional Chinese medicine with medical knowledge gathered from throughout the empire, provided his assessment of the cause of death. Investigator Jamuka, the Venetian, shows clear signs of poisoning, probably from a plant-based toxin that acts relatively slowly but inevitably proves fatal. What kind of poison do you suspect? Most likely extracted from plants native to Central Asia or Persia, substances that would be available to someone with knowledge of traditional medicine or access to the empire's extensive trade networks. How long would such a poison take to prove fatal? Depending on the dose and the victim's constitution, anywhere from several hours to a full day. Marco Polo would have felt increasingly ill, but might not have immediately recognized that he had been poisoned. Dr. Li Wei, was there evidence of what Marco Polo had consumed before his death? There were remains of tea and dried fruits on his desk, along with what appeared to be Persian sweets that had been brought as gifts from visitors. The variety of food items suggested multiple possible sources for the poison, making it difficult to determine which visitor or servant might have been responsible for administering the fatal substance. Jamuka's examination of Marco Polo's papers revealed the scope of his investigative work and the sensitive nature of the information that had been stolen. The Venetian had been conducting systematic reviews of trade route taxation, currency exchange practices, and the activities of merchant communities throughout the empire. The missing documents included detailed reports on suspected tax evasion, currency manipulation, and smuggling operations that involve both foreign merchants and imperial administrators. Such information would be valuable to anyone seeking to avoid prosecution or to eliminate competition in lucrative trade relationships. Minister Bayan, who would have been most threatened by Marco Polo's investigations into commercial irregularities? Several groups had reasons to fear exposure. Foreign merchant communities engaged in tax avoidance, imperial administrators who had been accepting bribes, and trade route commanders who had been allowing smuggling in exchange for personal payments. Can you provide specific names of individuals who might have been under investigation? Ahmed al-Baghdadi, a Persian merchant who controls much of the silk trade between Central Asia and China, had been questioned about discrepancies in his tax payments. General Nayan, who commands the northern trade routes, had been asked to explain irregularities in customs collections. And there was Zhao Ming, a Chinese administrator responsible for currency regulation, who had been providing questionable exchange rates to certain favored merchants. Each of these individuals would have had both motive and opportunity to eliminate Marco Polo before his investigations could result in formal charges or imperial punishment. Jamuka decided to begin his investigation with Ahmed al-Baghdadi, whose extensive trade network and cultural connections could have provided both the means and the expertise necessary for sophisticated poisoning. He found the Persian merchant at his warehouse compound near the Grand Canal, where goods from throughout Central Asia were stored before distribution to markets across China. The facility was impressive in its scale and organization, reflecting the enormous wealth that could be accumulated through successful participation in the empire's trade networks. Ahmed was a man of 45 with the sophisticated manner and expensive clothing that marked him as one of the empire's most successful foreign merchants. His office was decorated with fine carpets, metalwork, and manuscripts that demonstrated both his prosperity and his cultural refinement. Investigator Jamuka. Marco Polo's death is indeed a great loss to the empire. He was one of the few imperial officials who truly understood the complexities of international trade and the challenges facing foreign merchants in China. Ahmed al-Baghdadi, I understand that Marco Polo had been reviewing your tax payments and trade documentation. The Venetian was conducting routine inspections of merchant activities, as was his duty. I cooperated fully with his inquiries and provided all requested documentation. Were there any irregularities discovered during his review? There were some questions about currency conversions and the timing of certain tax payments, but nothing that could not be explained by the complexities of international commerce. Did these questions create tensions between you and Marco Polo? We had professional discussions about proper procedures, but I respected his authority and his genuine desire to ensure fair treatment for all merchants. Ahmed, where were you on the night Marco Polo was killed? At home with my family, hosting a dinner for other Persian merchants resident in the city. Several guests can confirm my presence throughout the evening. Despite the apparent alibi, Jamuka noted that Ahmed's extensive network of associates and employees could have carried out the murder while the merchant maintained his public presence at social gatherings. General Nayan commanded the military forces responsible for protecting the northern trade routes and maintaining security at border crossings where customs duties were collected. His headquarters was located in the military district of Khanbalik, where Mongol traditions of military organization met the administrative sophistication of Chinese bureaucracy. Nayan was a Mongol of 50 with a traditional warrior bearing and tactical intelligence that had made the empire's military expansion possible. His office was decorated with weapons, maps, and tribute items that reflected both his military achievements and his administrative responsibilities. General Nayan Marco Polo's investigations included reviews of customs collections and trade route security. Did his work create any concerns for your operations? The Venetian was thorough in his inspections, sometimes too thorough for the practical realities of managing vast territories with limited personnel. What do you mean by too thorough? Marco Polo expected perfect accounting and complete documentation for every transaction, even in remote areas where such precision is difficult to maintain. Did he discover any irregularities in customs collections? There were discrepancies that resulted from the practical challenges of managing trade in difficult terrain with diverse merchant populations, but nothing that indicated systematic corruption. General, did Marco Polo's investigations threaten to damage your reputation or career? I was concerned that his reports might not adequately reflect the challenges we face in maintaining security while facilitating legitimate trade. Where were you when Marco Polo was murdered? At the military compound, meeting with commanders from various frontier posts who had come to the capital for consultations. Many officers can confirm my presence. While Nayan's alibi seemed credible, his obvious frustration with Marco Polo's investigative methods provided clear motive for eliminating an inspector whose reports could damage military careers. Zhao Ming, the Chinese administrator responsible for currency regulation, presented a different type of suspect whose cultural background and administrative expertise made him particularly interesting in the context of sophisticated poisoning. Zhao maintained his office in the Ministry of Revenue, where Chinese bureaucratic traditions had been adapted to serve the needs of Mongol imperial administration. His workspace was filled with account books, currency samples, and the mathematical instruments necessary for managing the empire's complex monetary systems. Zhao was a man of 40 with the scholarly manner and meticulous attention to detail that characterized the Chinese administrative class. His position required balancing traditional Chinese financial practices with the diverse monetary systems used throughout the Mongol Empire. Administrator Zhao, I understand that Marco Polo had been reviewing currency exchange practices and questioning certain exchange rates provided to merchants. The Venetian was concerned about consistency in currency conversions, particularly for transactions involving multiple monetary systems. Were there any specific problems with your currency regulation procedures? Marco Polo questioned whether certain merchants were receiving preferential exchange rates that were not available to other traders. Were such preferences being provided? Sometimes flexibility in exchange rates is necessary to facilitate important trade relationships or to accommodate the complexities of international commerce. Did Marco Polo view such flexibility as inappropriate? He preferred strict uniformity in all administrative procedures, even when such rigidity might harm legitimate business relationships. Zhao Ming, where were you when Marco Polo was killed? At home with my family, working on currency calculations for the next month's trade settlements. My wife and servants can confirm my presence. Despite his apparent alibi, Zhao's access to diverse monetary systems and his obvious frustration with Marco Polo's rigid approach to administration provided both means and motive for murder. The breakthrough in the case came when Jamuka discovered that someone had been systematically forging imperial documents that authorized preferential treatment for certain merchants and administrators, generating substantial profits through the manipulation of official procedures. This discovery emerged when he found discrepancies between the official seals on certain documents in Marco Polo's files and the authentic imperial seals used for legitimate administrative purposes. The forged documents had been used to authorize reduced tax rates, preferential currency exchanges, and exemptions from normal inspection procedures for a network of merchants and officials who were sharing the profits from these illegal advantages. Marco Polo's investigations had been close to exposing this forgery network when he was murdered, suggesting that his death was part of a larger conspiracy to protect systematic corruption rather than the act of a single threatened individual. Further investigation revealed that the forgery operation was being coordinated by Timur, a Mongol administrator who had been using his knowledge of imperial procedures and his access to official seals to create false documents that benefited a network of collaborators. When confronted with evidence of the forgery scheme, Timur initially denied involvement, but eventually confessed to both the document fraud and the murder of Marco Polo. "I never intended to kill the Venetian," Timur admitted. "Marco Polo was getting too close to discovering our document operations, and I hoped to convince him to overlook certain irregularities in exchange for personal benefits." "What happened during your meeting with him?" Marco Polo refused to be corrupted and threatened to report the entire forgery network to the Khan personally. He said that imperial justice required absolute honesty from all administrators. "So you decided to poison him?" I panicked. If Marco Polo had exposed our activities, everyone involved would have faced execution or exile. The profits we were sharing were substantial, but the punishments would have been severe. "How did you administer the poison?" I brought Persian sweets as a peace offering and put ground oleander seeds in the honey coating. The poison acts slowly, so Marco Polo would not have realized immediately what was happening. "What did you do with the stolen documents?" I took all evidence of our forgery operations and destroyed most of it, though some documents had already been distributed to network participants. The confession revealed that Marco Polo had been killed not for his foreign origins or cultural differences, but for his integrity in refusing to participate in a corruption network that was stealing from the imperial treasury. The investigation also exposed the sophisticated nature of the forgery operation, which had involved participants from multiple cultural backgrounds who had learned to manipulate the empire's administrative systems for personal profit. The trial of Timur and his co-conspirators was conducted according to Mongol legal principles, with Kublai Khan serving as final judge and a council of senior administrators determining appropriate punishments. The prosecution emphasized that the forgery network had not only stolen from the imperial treasury, but had also undermined the trust and administrative efficiency that made the empire's diverse cultural integration possible. The defense argued that the corruption had resulted from the complexities of managing diverse monetary and legal systems rather than from malicious intent to harm imperial interests. The court ultimately sentenced Timur to death for murder and treason, while his co-conspirators received punishments ranging from exile to confiscation of property, depending on their level of involvement in the scheme. The case established important precedents for protecting administrative integrity and maintaining the cultural neutrality that made the Mongol Empire's multicultural governance successful. For the One Dynasty administration, Marco Polo's murder highlighted the challenges of managing vast territories with diverse populations while maintaining consistent standards of honesty and efficiency. Jamuka's investigation enhanced his reputation as an investigator capable of uncovering complex administrative conspiracies while maintaining the cultural balance that kept the empire stable. The case also demonstrated the importance of having administrators like Marco Polo who could bridge cultural differences while maintaining absolute loyalty to imperial interests rather than personal or factional advantages. Kublai Khan used the investigation to implement new security procedures for official documents and to establish additional oversight mechanisms for administrative activities involving foreign merchants and multicultural trade networks. In his final report to the Khan, Jamuka wrote, "The murder of Marco Polo demonstrates that the empire's strength depends not only on military power, but also on the integrity of administrators who serve imperial justice rather than personal profit. The diversity that makes our empire great also creates opportunities for those who would exploit cultural differences for criminal purposes." The case became part of Yuan dynasty legal tradition, serving as an example of how systematic investigation could protect both individual justice and imperial administrative integrity in a multicultural environment. Marco Polo's administrative work was continued by other officials who implemented new procedures for detecting document forgery and monitoring the activities of administrators with access to imperial seals and official procedures. The investigation had revealed the sophisticated criminal networks that could develop within the Mongol Empire's administrative systems, where cultural diversity and vast territorial extent created both opportunities and vulnerabilities. Jamuka continued to serve as an investigator for many more years, handling cases that ranged from simple theft to complex international conspiracies. But the Marco Polo case remained one of his most challenging, a reminder that even in the world's most successful multicultural empire, individual integrity was essential for maintaining the trust that made diverse populations governable. The Khan's justice had been served through careful investigation and fair legal procedures, but the case had also revealed the ongoing challenges of managing an empire where different legal traditions, cultural values, and economic systems had to be balanced against the universal requirements of honesty and administrative integrity. In the great city of Khanbalik, where East met West under Mongol rule, the memory of Marco Polo and the lessons learned from his murder continued to influence administrators who understood that the empire's greatest strength lay not in its military conquests, but in its ability to create justice and opportunity for people from all cultures and backgrounds. The Venetian's death had been avenged, but his legacy lived on in the administrative reforms and cultural policies that helped the Mongol Empire maintain its position as the most successful multicultural political system in human history. Let the hush of the night wrap around you, and know this. Some stories don't end. They drift. They dream. They wait for you to listen again. Good night.